Welcome to Foxglove Hollow's Liz's boat. Our first step is to tape off the outer edges of our canvas. Make sure the tape is really well stuck down. Next, we're going to lighten up the blue paint with a little bit of white. Take a scoop of blue, then take a scoop of white and mix them up. Never ever mix into your original puddle. You can end up with way too much paint that way. Now we're going to make some turquoise. So we're just going to take our dirty brush, scoop some more blue, add some yellow to it, and give it a good stir. Add a little bit of white to it till it looks like a color you like. A little bit more white. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Wipe your brush off. Now we're going to get our handy dandy little kitchen sponge and scoop up some of that lovely blue we've mixed up. And we are going to spread that across the top of our canvas. Be careful you don't run the paint under the tape. It makes for a messy edge. Keep your paint strokes or your sponge strokes going horizontally because this is far away ocean and ocean is always level. There we go. Now we'll scoop in a little bit of that turquoise color and we're going to run it right along underneath that blue. Run the sponge back and forth, blending as you go. Move up into the blue and run along that line back and forth until you have a really nice soft blend. There we go. That's looking pretty good. See how I'm keeping these strokes horizontal? There we go. Now we'll get a clean sponge and we're going to scoop out some of that sand color and run that right along the bottom of our painting. We're going to do the same thing with the edge where it meets the green. Work the sponge back and forth over this edge. And it's going to turn into sand going out into the sea. This sand color is white with brown and a touch of yellow. There we go. Work it back and forth along that line. There we have it. That's looking really good. Let's throw that sponge in some water so we can still use it later. And then we'll just take our painting and set it aside to dry. Now, you're going to learn how to draw a boat using a figure 8. Make your figure 8 long and narrow, squished on both ends. Now, just follow along with me. This first line starts at the highest point of the front loop. It's about as long as the front loop and curves slightly towards the back. The line at the back curves slightly forward and is about half as long as the back loop. Now we're going to use a slightly curved line to join these together. Just in from the front of the first loop, we're going to draw a curved line that meets almost the bottom of the boat. There, can you see it? We'll do a little bit of erasing here. We don't need that line. We don't need that line. And we'll smooth this out around this area. There, look, we have a little boat. Let's add a few details. This is a little wooden boat, so let's make some planks running from one end to the other. Try to keep them about the same distance apart and follow the line of the boat. Round when it gets round and flat when it gets flat. These planks on the other side tilt slightly in the other direction. Now, let's add a bit of trim following the top edge of the boat. And don't forget the inside back. We're going to add a little bit more detail running down the planks here. Give it a little bit more texture and dimension. And there we have it, a lovely little boat. All we need to do now is tear it out and transfer it onto our canvas. We're going to take a little piece of masking tape and stick our boat where we want it on our canvas. That looks pretty good there, I think. Next, we're going to take our carbon paper and put it shiny side down underneath our boat. Don't be tempted to stick the carbon paper down as well, because you're going to want to lift it up and check underneath to make sure the transfer is working properly. Draw all the lines on your boat. And you can lift this paper up and check underneath just to make sure you're getting everything. You don't want to miss any of these lines.
Would you like coffee? Tea? I think there's a breakfast pastry. I'm losing weight, Scott said abruptly. That's what's on my mind. It's sort of funny, you know. I used to steer clear of the bathroom scale because these last 10 years or so, I've been crazy about the news I got from it. Now I'm on it first thing every morning. Ellis nodded. I see. No reason for him to avoid the bathroom scale, Scott thought. The man was what his grandmother would have called a stuffed string. He'd probably live another 20 years if a wild card didn't come out of the deck. Maybe even make the century. I certainly understand the scale avoidance syndrome.
Now you can lift it up and take a peek. It'll work. It worked. Okay. Toss that off to the side. And we're on to the next step. I'm going to mix myself a sort of a grubby grey color using some white and some brown and a little bit of black. I'm looking for a shadowy color for the bottom of my boat.
But he hadn't created it. He had moved on to bigger things. But so far, Bob Ellis grinned, showing teeth that were still his own. That's a fair amount, all right. My guess he was in Andalusia.
Maybe a wee bit darker here. That's looking good. So now I'm going to run this along the very bottom of my boat.
Not just on the heart, but on the whole kit and caboodle, as I'm sure you know from Web and Dean. He rolled his eyes at Scott. Where are you now?
Add a little bit more white. And I'm going to get gradually lighter as I go up. The part of the boat that bellies out the most will be the lightest. Don't worry about making everything blend perfectly here. It's really nice when it's kind of raggedy.
A flannel shirt and scuffed up Georgia giants. He looked more like a woodsman or a Dr. Bob cast the eye of a professional up and down Scott Terry's 76 inches, more like 78 in boots. He paid particular attention to the curve of belly over the belt and the long thigh muscles built up by leg presses and hack squats on machines Dr. Bob now avoided. Unbutton your shirt and hold
Both the bow and the stern of the boat are going to be slightly darker than the middle section. Notice how I am painting with the boards of the boat, not against them.
adipose deposits wise-ass kids like to call man tips. I'm going to say
We're just going to continue on here and get lighter and lighter as we go up this boat. Here I'm adding a little bit of the dark at either end, following the board shape in the bow as well as the stern. Then I'm going to get a little white and fill in the center, and I'm still following that same shape of the board and the same shape of the boat. This will give you a really realistic looking curve to your boat. Follow the curve of the board.
Scott, Dr. Bob said, are you there or did I lose you? I'm here, Scott said. The last time we played tennis, I did go 240. I know, because that was when I finally got on the scale. I decided the time had come to drop a few pounds. I was starting to get all out of breath by the third set. But as of this morning, I weigh 212. He sat down again next to his parka, which gave another tingle. Bob eyed him carefully. You don't look like 212 to me, Scott. Pardon me for saying, but you look quite a bit heavier than that. But healthy? Yes. Not sick? No. Not to look at you anyway, but have you got a scale? I bet you do. Let's check it out. Dr. Bob considered him for a moment, wondering if Scott's actual problem might be in the gray matter above his eyebrow. In his experience, it was mostly women who tended to be
Now I'm going to start working up the other side of the boat.
all right, let's do that. Follow me.
A little bit of dark,
Bob led him into his study stock
and then I'll top it off with a little bit of white.
anatomy chart on one wall and a line of diplomas on another. Scott was staring at the paperweight between Ellis's computer and his printer. Bob followed his gaze and laughed. He picked the skull up off of the desk and tossed it to Scott. Plastic rather than bone, so don't worry about dropping it. A gift from my eldest grandson. He's 13, which I think of as the age of tasteless gifts. Step over here and let's see what we've got. In the corner was a gantry-like scale upon which two weights, one big and one little, could be moved until the steel beam balanced. Ellis gave it a tap. The only things I kept when I closed my office downtown were the anatomy chart on the wall and this. It's a Sika, the finest medical scale ever made.
Here I'm setting some of the lines between the boards with just a little bit of that dark color.
Cheap. Is it accurate? Let's just say if I weighed a 25-pound bag of flour on it and the scale said it weighed 24, I'd go back to Hannaford's and demand a refund. You should take off your boots if you want something close to a true weight. And why did you bring your coat? You'll see. Scott didn't take off his boots, but put the parka on instead, to the tune of more jingling from the pocket. Now not just fully dressed, but dressed to be outside on a day much colder than this one. He stepped on the scale. Let her rip. In order to allow for the boots and the coat, Bob ran the counterweight all the way to 250, then worked backwards, first sliding the weight, then nudging it along. The needle of the balance bar rounded at 240 and 230 and 220, which Dr. Bob would have thought impossible. Never mind. Scott Terry simply looked heavier than that. He could have been off in his estimate by a few pounds, but he had weighed too many overweight men.
Now let's fill in the inside of the boat with a little shadow.
The bar balanced at 212 pounds. I'll be different pitch, Dr. Bob
It's a
said.
little bit lighter on this upper edge here.
Calibrated. Don't think so, Scott said. He stepped off the scale and put his hands in his coat pockets. From each, he took a fistful of quarters. Been saving these in an antique chamber pot for years. By the time Nora left, it was almost full. I must have 5 pounds of metal in each pocket, maybe more. Ellis said nothing.
Give it a nice blend.
Now do you see why I didn't want to go to Dr. Adams? Scott let the coin slide back into his pocket with another jolly jingle. Ellis stopped his voice. I have this right. You're getting the same weight at home? To the pound. My scale's in a reserve step-on.
And now let's paint in that top piece of wood with a lovely bright white trim.
I usually like a little bump and grind music when I strip, but since we've undressed together in the club locker room, I guess I can do without it. Scott took off his parka and hung it on the back of the chair. Then, balancing with first one hand and then the other on Dr. Bob's desk, he took off his boots. Next came the flannel. He unbuckled his belt, stepped out of his jeans, stood there in his boxers, t-shirt, and socks. I could chuck these as well, he said, but I think I've taken off enough to make the point. Because, see, this is what scared me. The thing about the clothes. It's why I wanted to talk to a friend who could keep his mouth shut instead of my regular dog. He pointed to the clothes and boots on the floor, then at the parka with its sagging pockets. How much would you say all that stuff weighs? With the coins? At least 14 pounds, possibly as much as 18. Do you want to weigh them? No, Scott said. He got back on the scale. There was no need to move the weights. The beam balanced at 212 pounds. Scott dressed, and they went back to the living room. Dr. Bob poured them each a tiny knock of Woodford Reserve, and although it was only 10 in the morning, Scott did not refuse. He took his down in a single swallow, and the whiskey lit a comforting fire in his stomach. Ellis took 2 delicate birdie sips, as if testing the quality, then tossed off the rest. It's impossible, you know, he said, as he put the empty glass on an end table. Scott nodded. Another reason I didn't want to talk to Dr. Adams. Because it would be in the system, Ellis said. A matter of record. And yes, he'd have insisted to find out exactly what's going on with you. Although he didn't say so, Scott thought insisted was too mild. In Dr. Adams's consulting room, the phrase that had popped into his head was taken into custody. That was when he decided to keep his mouth shut and talk to his retired medical friend instead. You look 240, Ellis said. Is that how you feel? Not exactly. I felt a little ploddy when I actually did weigh 240. I guess that's not a real thing. I think it's good, Ellis said, whether it's in the dictionary or not. It wasn't just being overweight, though I knew I was.
Just going to fill in a little bit more detail here with my liner brush. A few gentle lines between the planks on the boat.
Scott sighed. Sure, that too. It's cast a shadow over my life. Better now. I'm better, but it's still there. Can't lie about that. Physically, though, I never felt bad. Still worked out a little 3 times
A little bit of shadow here under the top rail.
Now I know, it's not so much. Or anything.
Now, let's get a little tiny bit of red.
It's more like the energy I
I'm
have.
going to mix this with some water so it's quite see-through. We're going to use this for the bottom plank on our boat.
One more question, and you'll pardon me, but I have to ask. Ask away, anything.
I'm adding a tiny bit of black here just to dull it down.
Right? Pulling the leg of the old retired sawbones? Absolutely not, Scott said. I guess I don't have to ask if you've ever seen a similar face, but have you ever read about one? Ellis shook his head. Like you.
Now carefully fill in this bottom plank. Because we've mixed our red with some water, it's going to be see-through, and it will retain that dark shadowy color that you put on at the very beginning.
Given its gravity. Are there medical websites you can go on to see if there are any other cases like mine? Even ones that are sort of similar? I can and will, but I can tell you now there won't be. Ellis hesitated. This isn't just outside my experience. I'd say it's outside human experience. Hell, I want to say it's impossible. If that is, your scale and mine weigh true, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. What happened to you, Scott? What was the genesis? Did you irradiated by something? Get a lungful of some off-brand bug spray? Thanks. I have thought. So far as I can tell, there's nothing. But one thing's for sure. I feel better having talked to you, not just sitting on it. Scott stood up and grabbed his jacket. Where are you going? Home. I've got those websites to work on. It's a big deal. Although I have to tell you, it doesn't seem quite as big as it did. Ellis walked with him to the door. You say you've noted a steady weight loss. Slow, but steady.
Now I've washed my brush out again, and I've got some blue, and we'll dull that down with a bit of black and mix some water into it. Make it thin like we did with the red.
To this, Dr. Bob had no answer. Keep your mouth shut about this, Bob. I will. He promised to keep it.
Now we're going to carefully fill in that top plank on the boat.
They stood side by side, looking at the day. It was a nice one. Foliage was nearing peak, and the hills were burning with color. Moving from the sublime to the ridiculous, Dr. Bob said, "How are you doing with the restaurant ladies up the street from you? Heard you were having some problems there." Scott didn't bother asking Ellis where he had heard this. Castle Rock was a small town, and word got around. It got around faster, he supposed, when a retired doctor's wife was on all sorts of town and church committees. If Ms. McComb and Miss Donaldson heard you calling them ladies, you'd be in their black books, and given my current problem, they're not even on my radar. An hour later, Scott sat in his own study, part of a handsome three-decker on Castle View, above the town proper. A pricier address than he was comfortable with than Nora had wanted it, and he had wanted knowledge of Foxglove Cone draft site for material. Foxglove Cone
You'll often find as the white paint dries, it dulls slightly. So I'm just going back in here, just on the belly part of the boat, the part of the boat that sticks out the most, and touched up with a little bit more white. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush here. Now let's get a bit of shadow down under this boat. I'm going to mix a little white with a little blue and a little black and a touch of brown. I'm making a kind of a deep, warm gray. We're going to run this right along the bottom of our boat. Just like that.
It was totally empty. There weren't even light fixtures. Outside the window was a green sward that just happened to be part of the Highland Acres golf course where Myra Ellis had played many rounds. On a few occasions, Myra's foursome had included Scott Ellis' wife and Flagstaff. Still detached.
Now I've washed my paintbrush off, and with a damp brush I'm just going to work out that harsh edge. Drag it out into the sand a bit.
As if I do, Scott thought. Time is invisible, unlike weight. But maybe that wasn't true. You could feel weight, yes. You were carrying too much, it made you cloddy. But wasn't it, like time, basically just a human construct? Hands on a clock, numbers on a bathroom scale. Weren't they only ways of trying to measure invisible forces that had visible effects? A feeble effort to corral some greater reality beyond what mere humans thought of as reality? Let it go. You'll drive yourself buggy. Bill gave another meow, and Scott returned his attention to the computer screen.
I'm going to take a piece of tape and put it straight across the top here, and this is going to be the guide for the white caps in my waves.
Not all at once, but slowly, each piece of furniture were being picked out by a careful
I'm mixing my white paint with a little bit of water to thin it out.
sofa, pink walls that were stenciled rather than papered, a Seth Thomas clock, a good white rag rug on the floor, a fireplace with a small cozy blaze within. The overhead fixture held hurricane lamps on wooden spokes. Those were a little over the top for Scott's taste, but the salespeople he was dealing with.
And now, using the tape as a guide, I'm running a broken line of white caps. I'm trying not to touch the tape. The tape's just giving me a guide.
And furnish those virtual reality rooms in colonial, garrison, craftsman, or cottage style. Today's job, however, was
Try to be quite thin and quite random with these lines.
play furniture,
You'll want them broken, random, and fine.
and meowing more insistently. Okay, Scott said and got up. He went into the kitchen, Bill beat Tat, leading the way with his tail up. There was a feline spring in Bill's step, and Scott was damned if he didn't feel pretty springy himself. He dumped Friskies into Bill's bowl, and
As you work closer to the front,
he went out on the front porch,
you can make the lines a little wider
going back
and a little wigglier.
wing chairs, Winfrey cows, high boys, all with the famous Queen Anne legs. He thought it was the kind of furniture you saw in funeral parlors. Heavy shit trying to seem but different strokes. He was in time to see the ladies, as Dr. Bob had called them.
Yeah. I'm filming now. Yeah. If you give me if you got half an hour, like, okay. How was your D&D? Awful. Did you guys die again?
No, like, we played a different game instead of D&D, so I don't remember. So I'm excited for this game.
Oh, yeah.
Try to keep these level. And remember,
And it wasn't
be
a
random.
5 hours.
Oh, yeah.
We played for a total, like, if we were in real life in the game, we would have played for about 40 seconds.
Oh, no. How come?
So slow. He had no idea what he was doing. The stats were all over the place. They didn't make sense. It was an awful layout. The entire thing was just about shooting guns and
Just so not you guys, hey?
Lord, help me to
You guys are characters and stories, aren't you?
Scott made a
just so
sudden
difficult
decision
and
and
my head
hustled
hurt
back
because
to
I
his
had to
study,
pay attention.
taking a
Yeah.
He goes off on tangents.
Oh, it's that one.
in the
Yeah.
hall, and grabbed his tablet.
Like, Dylan will crack a joke and he'll be like, I'm gonna grab one of the hot dogs from the stand over there. And he goes,
And the
well,
women
actually, hot dogs aren't available. This time in this game, we were probably more. We probably had about decades. And we didn't do this, we did this and this and this.
Oh, God, who's invited this guy to play?
Still young and plenty athletic. Handed along by twice on the subject of those dogs. Had spoken to Deirdre both times. Borne that faintly superior smile patiently, as she told him she really doubted that their dogs were doing their business on his lawn. Their backyard was fenced.
As we get down here onto the sand, we can make some squiggly lines.
Always accompany Missy and me on our daily runs. They were very well behaved. I think they must smell my cat, Scott had said. It's a territorial thing. I get that, and I understand you not wanting to leash them when you run, but I'd appreciate you checking out my lawn when you come back, and policing it up if necessary. Policing, Deirdre had said, her smile never wavering. Seems a bit militaristic, but maybe that's whatever you want to call it. Mr. Carey, dogs may be, as you say, doing their business on your lawn, but they're not our dogs. Perhaps it's something else that's concerning you? It wouldn't be a prejudice against same-sex marriage, would it? Scott had almost laughed, which would have been bad, even Trumpian diplomacy. Not at all. It's a prejudice against not wanting to step in a surprise package left by one of your boxes. Good discussion, she said, still with that smile. Not maddening as she might have hoped, but definitely irritating, and closed the door gently but firmly in his face. With his mysterious weight loss the farthest thing from his mind for the first time in days, Scott watched the two women running toward him with their dogs loping gamely along in their wake. Deirdre and Missy were talking as they ran, laughing about something. Their flushed cheeks shone with sweat and good health. The Macomb woman was clearly the better runner of the two, and just as clearly holding back a bit to stay with her partner. They were paying zero attention to the dogs, which was hardly neglect. View Drive wasn't a hotbed of traffic, especially in the middle of the day. And Scott had to admit that the dogs were good about keeping out of the road, and that at least they were well trained. Not going to happen today, he said. It never does when you're prepared. Yet it would be pleasant to wipe that little quirk of a smile off Ms. Macomb's. Oh, but it did happen. First, one of the boxes swerved.
There we go. That looks like just about enough.
Ran onto Scott's lawn and squatted side by side. Scott raised his tablet and snapped click closer. That evening, after an early supper of spaghetti carbonara, followed by a wedge of chocolate cheesecake, Scott got on his scale, hoping, as he always did these days, that things had finally
Now it's time to paint the foreground. Let's take some of that tan
he had just put away.
and we're going to mix it with some of the brown.
Bill was watching him from the closed toilet seat, his tail curled neatly around his paws. Well, Scott told him, it is what it is, right? As Nora used to say when she came
And we're going to lay it here along the front in a nice little sand dune.
Bill yawned. But we also change the things we can, don't we? You hold the fort. I'm going to pay a visit. He grabbed his iPad and jogged the quarter mile to the renovated farmhouse where Macomb and Donaldson had lived for the last 8 months or so, since opening Holy for Holy. He knew their schedule pretty well in the off-ramp way one gets to know one's neighbors' comings and goings, and this would be a good time to catch Deirdre alone. Missy
I dip back and forth between the brown and the tan here,
Deirdre, who was the out front
just making sure it's not one solid color.
She was the one in charge, Scott believed, both at work and at home. Missy Donaldson impressed him as a sweet little thing who looked at the world with a mixture of fear and wonder. More of the former than the latter, he guessed. Did Macomb see herself as Missy's protector as well as her partner? Maybe.
Make sure to make the top of that sand dune nice and crisp and clean.
At its chime, Bee and Dum began to bark in the backyard. Deirdre opened
Now I'm
the door.
going in with a bit of white just to add some highlights here and there.
It would no doubt look smashing as she stood at the hostess stand and showed parties to their various tables. Her eyes were her best feature, a bewitching shade of greeny gray and up-tilted a bit at the corners. Oh, Mr. Carey, she said, how really nice to see you. And the smile which said, how really boring to see you. I'd love to invite you in, but I have to get down to the restaurant. Lots of reservations tonight. Leave people, you know. I won't keep you, Scott said, smiling his own smile. I just dropped by to show you this.
A little bit of black down in the bottom corners here will focus the eye into the center of the painting. Blend it all out really well.
She looked at it for a long time. The smile faded. Seeing that didn't give him as much pleasure.
A few patches of this dark foreshadow
She said at last.
will give us a nice base to grow our grass from.
Without it, she sounded tired and older than her years, which might number 30. You win. It's not about winning, believe me. As it came out of his mouth, Scott remembered a college teacher once remarking that when someone added, believe me, to a sentence, you should beware. You've made your point, Ben. I can't come down and pick it up now, and Missy's already at work, but I will after we close. You won't even need to turn on your porch light. I should be able to see the leavings by the street light. You don't need to do that. Scott was starting to feel slightly mean, and in the wrong somehow. You win, she said. I've already bagged it up. I just, what, wanted to get one up on me? If that was it, mission accomplished. From now on, Missy and I will do our running down in the park. There will be no need for you to report us to the local authorities. Thank you and good evening. She started to close the door. Wait a second, Scott said. Please. She looked at him through the half-closed door, face expressionless. Going to the animal control guy over a few piles of dog crap never crossed my mind, Ms. McComb. Look, I just want us to be good neighbors. My only problem is the way you brushed me off. Refuse to take me seriously. That isn't how good neighbors do, at least not around here. Oh, we know exactly how good neighbors do, she said, around here. The slightly superior smile came back, and she closed the door with it still on her face. Before, however, he had seen a gleam in her eye that might have been tears. We know exactly how good neighbors do around here, he thought, walking back down the hill. What the hell did that mean?
Now here I've taken some brown and some tan, and a little bit of white, maybe a touch of black in there too, and kind of mixed it up on my paintbrush. I'm just dipping into each puddle and grabbing a bit. And I'm layering it on here. This is going to be a little fence post. Keep the shadow on one side and a highlight on the other. There, I'm dropping in a bit of white. Get some light over there.
I'm still a 40 waist and a 34 leg. I don't need to tighten my belt or let it out, although I'm eating like a lumberjack. Eggs, bacon, and sausage for breakfast. Sauces on everything at night. Got to be at least 3,000 calories a day. Maybe 4. Did you do any research? I did, Dr. Bob said. So far as I can tell, there's never been a case like yours. One of her reports about people whose metabolism is in overdrive, people who eat, as you say, like lumberjacks, still stay thin. No cases of people who wake up saying naked and dressed. Oh, but it's so much more, Scott said. He was smiling again. He smiled a lot these days, which was probably crazy given the circumstances. He was losing weight like a late-stage cancer patient, but the work was going like gangbusters, and he had never felt more cheerful. Sometimes, when he needed a break from the computer screen,
And then we're going to do it again over here for a second post. You can make these posts leaning if you like to. You can make them as ragged or as old as you like.
I weighed 208 flat, straight out of the shower and buck naked. I got my hand weights out of the closet, the 20-pounders, and stepped on the scales with one in each hand. Still 208 flat. Silence on the other end for a moment, and then Ella said, "You're shitting me. Bob, if I'm lying, I'm dying." More silence. Then, it's as if you've got some kind of weight-repelling force field around you. I know you don't want to be poked and prodded, but this is an entirely new thing. And it's big. There could be implications we can't even conceive of. I don't want to be a freak, Scott said. Put yourself in my place. Think about it. I have. A lot. And I have no urge to be a part of Inside View's tabloid hall of fame, with my picture right between the Night Flyer and Slender Man. Also, I've got my work to finish. I promised Nora a share of the money, even though the divorce was final before I got the job. And I'm pretty sure she can use it.
Now let's tie our boat to one of these posts using our fine liner brush and some brown and black and gray. Adding a little water to your paint will make the fine lines easier to paint.
There's that. You sound remarkably cheery, considering what's going on with you. I feel cheerful. That might be nuts, but it's true. Sometimes I think this is the world's greatest weight loss program. Yes,
Now let's give ourselves a couple of pieces of wire on these two posts.
Music turned up any louder, today it was the Ramones, he never would have heard it, and his visitor might have gone away, probably with relief, because when he opened the front door, Missy Donaldson was standing there, and she looked scared half to death. It was the first time he'd seen her since taking the photos of Dee and Dum relieving themselves on his lawn. He supposed Deirdre had been as
Now, time to get some beach grass. We are going to take some yellow and mix some black into it. This makes a very, very nice green.
no matter how well behaved the dogs were. The park had a leash law. Scott had seen the sign. Miss Donaldson, he said. Hello. This is also
Add a little water to that so we can make a nice fine line.
step over the threshold or make any sudden move. She looked like she might leap down the steps and run away like a deer if she did. She was blonde, pretty as her partner, but with a sweet face and clear blue eyes. There was a fragility about her, something that made Scott think of his mother's death.
Now, whenever I'm painting grass, I like to grow my grass from the sand up. I never ever pull it from the sky down. I also like to flip my painting over so that I can pull my grass towards me. That way I can see what I'm doing.
She was shaking her head before he was halfway through these standard offers of hospitality and doing it hard enough to make her ponytail flip from one shoulder to the other. I just came to apologize for Deirdre. There's no need to do that, he said, and no need to
Now, I should have started this grass on the other post, so I wasn't going to be dragging my hand through it.
bags and check out my lawn on your way back. That's not too much to ask, is it? No, not at all. I even suggested it to Deirdre. She almost snapped my head off. Scott sighed. I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Donaldson. You can call me Missy if you like. Looking down and flushing slightly, as if she'd made a remark that might be taken for risque. I would like that, because all I want is for us to be good neighbors. Most of the folks up here on the view are, you know.
Now, make sure your grass isn't growing out of the same hole in the sand.
How I could have gotten off on the
You'll want long blades and short blades. You'll want them crossing over and leaning in different directions. That's what's going to give you natural looking beach grass. I'm going to put a little bit over down on this side too, and you'll see how the grass in the foreground will push the boat into the middle ground.
But you weren't at home. He thought she would ask why he hadn't tried again, but she didn't. I came to apologize for Deirdre, but I also wanted to explain her. She raised her eyes to his. It took an obvious effort. Her hands were clenched together at the waist of her jeans, but she did it. She's not mad at you, really. Well, she is, but you're not the only one. She's mad at everybody. Castle Rock.
Here I'm lightening up that green with a bit of the sand color for a variety of colors in my grass.
You knew it was a beach, but it seemed like an acceptable one. And the town is so beautiful. Well, you know that, I guess.
Don't forget to add that little bit of water so it's easier to paint thin lines.
By Valentine's Day, for sure. That's the only reason she let them put her on that poster. She won't talk about how bad things are, but she knows that you both do. She said something about the leaf peepers, and everyone says last summer was especially good. The summer was good, she said, speaking with a little more animation now. As for the leaf peepers, we get some, but most of them go further west into New Hampshire. North Conway has all those outlet stores to shop in and more touristy stuff to do. I guess when winter comes, we'll get the skiers passing through on their way to Bethel or Sugarloaf. Scott knew most skiers bypassed the rock, taking Route 2 to the western Maine ski areas, but why bum her out more than she already was? Only when winter comes, you meet the locals. You know how it is. You must. The other locals during the cold weather, and it's just enough to tide them over until the summer people come back. The hardware store, the lumber yard, Archie's Regina, they make only not many know some. Deirdre says it's not just because we're lesbians, but because we're married lesbians. I don't like to think she's right. I'm sure
Almost done. We're going to add a little water to the white paint. And we're going to paint a few little gulls here.
not in a snotty way, but in an honestly curious one. He thought of his bathroom scale again, and the relentless way the numbers rolled back. Actually, I'm sure of nothing. If it's true, I'm sorry. You should come down for dinner some night, she said. This might have been a snide way of telling him she knew he'd never taken a meal home, but he didn't think so. He didn't think this young woman had much in the way of snideness in her. I will, he said. I assume you do have 3 holidays? She smiled and lit her up. Oh, yes, many kinds. He smiled back. Stupid question. I have to go, Mr. Clay. Scott. She nodded. All right. Scott, it's good to talk to you.
And there we go. It's time to peel off the tape.
Glad I did. Scott shook it. Just one thing. I'd appreciate you not mentioning that I came to see you. Done deal. The day after Jonathan's visit, diner and finishing someone behind him that wanted and something got through.
Now all we need is a signature, and we're done. There you have it. Liz's boat.